Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. Today I'm back over here at the Piedmont Southern because I want to follow up on the video I did on diesel locomotives, and today we're going to take a look at the steam locomotive fleet here on the Piedmont Southern. So stick around for the video. Hit that little red subscribe button, and when the little bell comes up, click on it and click all. Thanks now. Now, as I said, we're going to take a look at the steam locomotive fleet here on the Piedmont Southern. But first, let me explain a couple of things. This layout is set in 1957, and I did that specifically because it was the last year that the Norfolk and Western Railway operated steam locomotives. And I wanted to be able to operate my N&W J Class 484 steam locomotives here on the model railroad. So that pretty much set it at 1957 or earlier. Now, I use steam locomotives here in two different ways. First of all, I have a fleet of 4 J-class locomotives from the N&W because the Southern Railway combined with or teamed up with the N&W on a couple of different trains, passenger trains, that came south from Washington, D.C., and then at Monroe Yard here near Lynchburg, they split out the diesels, took them off, put the N&W steam locomotives on, and from there on, the steam locomotives took them across N&W territory until they got to Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, where Southern Railway diesels were put on again for the rest of the trip. And that's one of the features, one of the operations that we do here on the model railroad. So I needed to have enough J-class steam locomotives, which really are one of my favorite locomotives of all time as far as steam goes. And so I've got 4 of those. 2 of them are BLI. One of them is a very old brass import, and then another one is a Bachmann. And unfortunately, the brass one, it doesn't take my 30-inch radii on the helix, so it can't go anywhere off of the main level. So it's probably going to be just a shelf sitter in the future. But it has very good sound, and it's a nice locomotive. The other locomotive I have, the Bachmann, you know, it's okay. It's a standby locomotive. It's not up to the same standards as the BLI, as I'll show you here in a minute. Now, on the other hand, I also have several steam locomotives that are part of my excursion fleet. And those include a Clinchfield Challenger. I have a Pennsylvania Railroad T1. I have a C&O Hudson that is streamlined. And I have several Southern Railway locomotives from England that will probably be used here on occasion in excursion service only, because I really like them. They're nice air-styled locomotives. It's not streamlined, but they're a beautiful locomotive. And from time to time, there were locomotives brought over from England and used on excursion service here. So that's what we're going to be doing with those here on the railroad. So what I want to do now, though, is bring you in real close here to the yard here at Monroe, and we'll start rolling out some of that steam locomotive fleet. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start by bringing out one of my BLI J-class locomotives. So let's crank her up and bring her forward. So this is one of my BLI J-class locomotives. And as I said, I have 2 of those. Now this was the first one I bought, and it has a TCS Wow Sound Steam decoder in it. Let you hear that. Now that whistle you just heard is specific to the N&W. It's included in the TCS well sound set of whistles, and it's a little bit different from another one that I use. Now originally when I got this locomotive, it did not come with a decoder in it. BLI at that time was offering them with and without decoders. I'm not sure now if they still have that option, but at any rate I got it without sound because, to be honest with you, back at the time that I purchased this, which was about 15 plus years ago, they were not known for very reliable decoders in their locomotives. So a lot of people back then were buying them without the decoders and installing what they wanted. So let me go ahead and pull this one up out of the way, and I'll bring out one of my others. Okay, the locomotive that I've just activated back there, number 606, is another BLI locomotive, and it has the BLI, I believe it's the Paragon 2 sound decoder in it. And it runs very well. I like the sound on it, so it's been pretty reliable. Matter of fact, all of the Paragon 2s that I have and later are very reliable. So this has been a very reliable locomotive. It runs very, very well, comparable to what I get with my wow sounds. The whistle you heard is another one of the N&W whistles that you'll find out there available. It's a little bit different, obviously, what the TCS had on it. Now next I'm going to bring up an older brass locomotive that I purchased 20, 30 years ago. Now this locomotive has a high bass speaker in it, and it really puts out a lot of good bass sound, as I'll show you. And again, this is another TCS decoder, and for this one I chose to use the Southern Pacific steamboat whistle, and it's what is currently in use on the N&W 611 J-class locomotive that's in excursion service. So I went ahead and used that on this. You'll also notice the difference in the color on that stripe. It's much redder. I got this particular paint from a hobby shop in Roanoke, Virginia, and they had gotten some of the original paint and had it matched in a shop down there, a paint shop. And so this is an exact duplicate of what was used on the locomotives. And let me bring up behind it, I have another one that is the Bachmann J class. So I'll bring that up on the track behind it. Pull this other one out of the way so you can see it a little bit better. Now the Bachmann J class, you'll notice it has the stripe on it is a little bit more orange looking, so I don't think it's quite as accurate as the brass locomotive I just showed you. One of the problems with that brass locomotive is it was made a long time ago, and they did not make allowances for fairly tight curves on it. Anything under a 36-inch radius, it does not do well. It shorts out on the frame, so I can't run it on anything other than my 36-inch mainline radii here on the Piedmont Southern itself. I can't run it up and down the helix. But at any rate, I'll let you hear the Bachmann J. And this one has a TCS wow sound decoder as well, but unfortunately I did not have a high bass speaker to put in it at the time. I need to go back and retrofit that to get that much deeper bass sound. So it's the standard 1-inch flat speaker that you see in most locomotives. Okay, let me get these out of the way so I can bring some other equipment out. Okay, next I want to bring out what I consider one of my most colorful locomotives. So this is a C&O Hudson. It was originally built as a Pacific and converted to a Hudson. Now this locomotive was built to be operated on a special train called the Chassis, which was discontinued, I believe, before they ever got it out on the road. And so these were put into general use. They generally ran between Richmond, Virginia and Charlottesville, somewhere in that order on passenger trains. And this particular locomotive is preserved just like this at the Railroad Museum in Baltimore. So you can still see this locomotive there. It's still a beautiful locomotive. I love the streamlining on this locomotive. So this one will be used in excursion trains on the Piedmont Southern. I'll let you hear the whistle. So it has a very nice distinctive whistle, and you know this is a special locomotive. It's a hybrid. It's got a die-cast chassis, so it runs like a diesel locomotive, but it has a brass tender and a brass shell, or a brass boiler and cab. So it's that hybrid, so it looks nice and it's as well detailed as a brass locomotive, but it runs a lot better than any of the brass locomotives that I've ever owned, I'll tell you that. Next, I'm going to bring out another one of my favorite steam locomotives. It's a total oddball. So let me show you this one. It is a Pennsylvania Railroad T1. So that's a duplex locomotive. Has a very, very distinctive Pensy whistle on it, doesn't it? If you look at that nose on it, it reminds you of the diesel shark nose locomotives. Well, the shark nose locomotives are based on the nose on this particular steam locomotive. It was designed by, I believe, by Raymond Loewy, who was a very, very famous Art Deco designer, did a lot of steam locomotive designs like this, also did one for the Southern Railway and various others. So he's very well known for that. And this particular shark nose design is one that I've always loved. So when this became available, I snapped it up pretty quick. And I justify it simply because at the time, the Pennsylvania Railroad owned a majority stake in the Norfolk and Western. So in my world, they brought one of these down here to N&W territory to give it a tryout to see if they could move some of their aging fleet that they were planning on getting rid of and retiring and scrapping onto the Norfolk and Western and letting them use them for a few years. One of the real problems with these locomotives is they were so powerful that if an engineer was not very, very careful with his throttle movements. He could literally put too much power onto those rods and just totally blow the drive rods out on these locomotives. They were just that powerful. So they had to be very careful about accelerating and changing speed, changing those throttle settings, lest they blow the rods. I still need to go back and adjust the sound settings on this. It's a bit loud. Now, fortunately, because these are an articulated locomotive, even though they're very, very big, they'll go around my 30-inch curves without any problems at all. Okay, finally now, the biggest locomotive that I have here is something that I had wanted for a long time, and I picked it up about 15 years ago. It was used, but it was in pretty good condition, so I went for it. And that's my Clinchfield Challenger 4664 steam locomotive. Now this particular locomotive was made by Athearn, and it was, I believe, in their one of the first of their big Genesis line locomotives, steam locomotives, and so it's a little bit shorter than the big boy, but it's very, very appropriate for this layout. It's the Clinchfield. The Clinchfield operated in Virginia, so this is one that we assume that that was left over from the Clinchfield when they retired their steam fleet, and it went into excursion service here on the Piedmont Southern. Now, this particular locomotive, as I said, was made by Athearn, but it came with an MRC sound decoder. And to be honest with you, the first thing I did was I took that MRC decoder out because it was way outdated. The sound package just wasn't very good. So I pulled that, put in a Wow Sound steam decoder with one of the high bass speakers, and I really, really like the sound of that steamboat whistle. I contacted the Clinchfield people, Historical Society, and various other groups online. Nobody knew what the whistle was on these locomotives that they could tell me. So I just assumed then that they probably would use something like the big steamboat whistle, so that's what I went with. And this guy, again, because it's articulated, it can take my 30-inch radius on my helix curves without any problem at all. So this is a really great hauler, but it also works well as far as excursion service, and it can pull, an excursion train of any length. Plus, it's got that great Wow Sound steam decoder in it, and I really do like the Wow Sound steam locomotive sounds. Now the next locomotive I want to show you is one of my UK locomotives. It is a Southern Railway Merchant Navy Class 462 Pacific. So it was built right around 1941, I believe, was the year that this one was brought out. And it was used on express passenger trains. And as I said, I justify this just because I like it. I like the paint scheme. I like the color. I like a lot of the things about it. It's a beautiful locomotive, and they did occasionally bring steam locomotives over from the UK. I think everybody about my age probably remembers the Flying Scotsman in the late 60s, early 70s, coming over and doing about 3 years of excursion work here in the United States. So let me go ahead and bring this in. So as I said, this is not a streamlined locomotive. It's what they called air styling, and it was done like this to give a nice smooth surface to the locomotive so it could be run through the cleaning racks with the passenger car. So it has the same curvature and shape, and it's very smooth, so they could run it through there without fear of anything getting caught on the cleaning equipment. And it has a low sound decoder in it, and it has a special sound package designed specifically for this locomotive. Well, that's a wrap for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the look at my favorite steam locomotives, the ones that I use here on the Piedmont Southern. You know, I wish I could afford a much larger collection of the various streamlined locomotives that have been produced over the last few years, but these things tend to run into money, and I'd rather put it into my diesel fleet and finally getting the model railroad completed to the point where I can have operating sessions. So have a great weekend, have a great week, and come on back next week for another video from the DCC Guy. Bye now.